Authenticity comes with a price. It doesn't, people say, oh, I want to be authentic, but they don't want to change. They don't want to pay the price. They don't want to change. They don't want to lose anything. They want everyone to love and adore them, but they want to be authentic. And those two things don't necessarily go together.
Hi, friends. I'm Dr. Victoria Ronaday. There's a light inside you the world teaches you to forget. This space helps you tune out the noise and tune back into yourself. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Inner Calling podcast. I'm really honored that you're spending time with me here, and I'm excited for you to hear from my guest today because he's a dear teacher of mine. The first time I talked to him, I told him, every day I'm not writing, I'm actually dying. And he took me on as a student, and that was the beginning of an incredible journey to reclaiming my voice as a writer and just this wonderful aliveness in my life, both spiritually and creatively. His name is Mark Matousek, and he is a best-selling author, teacher, and speaker whose work focuses on personal awakening and creative excellence through transformational writing and self-inquiry. He's also the founder of the Seekers Forum, which is a global community that explores the human condition. And today we'll be talking about his best-selling book, Lessons from an American Stoic, How Emerson Can Change Your Life, as well as his advice for writers. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Victoria. It's so good to see you.
Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Completely a pleasure for me.
So, I believe everyone has an inner calling inside them, and it's something deep inside us that is calling us home to ourselves. It could be an intuition. It could be an inner whisper or an inner knowing. Can you tell us a story about a time that you had an inner calling and where it led you?
Absolutely. The first important inner calling of my life was when I was in the second grade, and there was a lot of turmoil and violence and trouble happening in my home. Nobody around to give me any kind of advice. And I was quite stressed as a child, very isolated and confused, and also kind of a hypersensitive child. And I didn't know what to do. And something told me to sit down and write. And I still don't know what it was, but I remember finding a piece of paper, locking myself in the bathroom, and just asking myself, just sort of letting this voice that was inside me come out on paper. And what happened, Victoria, is I started to ask myself questions. As I was writing, questions would come up, and then I'd answer the questions. So it became a kind of Socratic dialogue with myself. It's very strange. And for me, it was a lifesaver because it gave me a place to figure out the confusion and the pain, the trauma that I was going through, and gain some distance from it. And that became, for me, a lifelong practice of journal keeping, and then becoming a writer, becoming a teacher, and teaching Writing to Awaken, which is all about asking ourselves deep questions, particularly in moments of stress and confusion, and recognizing that there is a knowing in us, there's a wisdom in us, there's a kind of a witness that we didn't put there, we didn't invent it, we can't really understand it, but it knows more than we do. So when you get that there's a source of wisdom inside that's bigger than your own mind and your own ego, when you ask direct enough questions, it can be a life-changing experience. It really has been for me. It sort of, that moment defined so much of my life.
Is that the voice that you write from?
Not necessarily. It depends what kind of writing I'm doing.
Oh, interesting.
When I'm writing memoir, that's not really the voice I'm writing from. But when I reread what I've written, the voice that comes up when I'm rereading is that voice.
I would have thought that was the voice you write from. What voices? Do you have multiple voices in your head that you write?
I think we all do. Yeah, we all have multiple voices.
I guess that's true. Yeah, in academia, that voice. Yeah, you're right. I had that voice. You learn a certain voice in academia, how to write research papers.
You do. And that voice, that wisdom voice, as I think of it as that inner knowing, I think of that as the wisdom voice, isn't where one writes memoir from. One writes memoir from the ego and from the wounded, messy, struggling self.
I think you're teaching me something here. Maybe that's why I struggle so much with writing memoir sometimes. I'm trying to write from that voice of inner wisdom, but it's another voice of the wound.
No, that wisdom voice is not wounded. No, and if we're not writing from the wound, then we're not doing the deep healing and transformational work of insight that memoir, the kind of memoir I'm interested in, is really all about.
Well, here's the thing I struggle with memoir writing or writing is it's hard for me to go back to the wound. It's been healed since. How do you advise people to go back to the wound or remember it? Or do you find that's very easy for people to remember the wound?
It's generally not, I wouldn't say easy, and it's certainly not painless, but most people have access to that wound, those wound feelings, and that moment of losing their innocence, or feeling that initial kind of rupture that wakes us up and says, "Oh my gosh, I've got to figure this. This is a dangerous world with pain in it. I've got to figure it out." So most people have access to that moment of wounding. But what I say to students, and this is very important, is that in order to write memoir, we don't have to dive into the wound.
Okay.
It's more like I picture it leaning over the side of a well with a flashlight and looking down.
Yeah.
You can see it, and there's enough felt experience related to it without re-traumatizing yourself, without just kind of getting in and wallowing in it, which is what scares people, particularly when they're writing about past painful experiences. I don't want to get caught there. Like you just said, I've healed.
Yeah.
Why would I want to go there?
Yeah, it's hard to go there.
Yeah.
I am curious, what inspires you in your writing?
Asking deep questions about this confusing business of life. I mean, I'm someone who cares most about philosophy and spirituality and psychological healing. I'm interested in what things mean.
Mm-hmm.
And so what keeps me going is asking questions. It's my obsession. And it's what drives me as a writer. And it's not what drives everyone. There are people, I know other folks who want to write about history, or they want to, or they're character driven. I'm very much driven by the human condition and the questions that arise from that. So on any given day, those questions are very alive. If we stop and ask ourselves, what's going on here?
For those of you who don't know, I had the pleasure of spending an hour a week with Mark for 2 years as his student. And it was one of the best gifts because one of the things I learned from you was the importance of inspiration, writing from an inspired place. Can you talk more about that?
For me, the inspiration goes to what I was just talking about around asking questions and finding out where the healing is wanted, where's the pain. For me, those two are inseparable. So inspiration has to come from, for me, an alive question that is connected in some way to something I'm trying to understand about being alive.
So you're saying it's inextricably tied to pain?
It's inextricably tied to the complex business of being alive, which necessarily includes pain. Mm-hmm. It can come from a moment of happiness. It can come from a moment of joy and fulfillment. Absolutely. But as everyone knows, even those are fleeting. So I'm very interested in Buddhism. I've been practicing for many years. And so it's this understanding that whatever is born will die, whatever begins will end. So everything is inherently unsatisfactory at the end of the day in the human realm, on the material realm.
Know.
And so you could say that it's connected to pain. It's certainly connected to impermanence.
How do you, I'm curious, like as a practitioner of Buddhism, how have you resolved this matter of just everything inextricably being impermanent and suffering and what the point of life is? How have you answered these big questions? I sit with a lot of patients who are really struggling with these very questions, especially teenagers.
Oh, God, yes. I don't think they're resolved. I think what happens with practice is you make more space for the truth of things. So you're not as shocked when things end. You're not as devastated when you're disappointed or when there's a loss of some kind. You understand that this is the nature of things. So it's not that you stop feeling, but you don't overreact. And that's a big difference. I find that is when you're not believing this idea that things should stay the same, mm-hmm. then the letting go and the moving through change isn't nearly as painful. You probably know the Buddha's teaching on the second arrow, that there's pain and then there's the second arrow, which is suffering. And the second arrow says, why is this happening? How could this happen to me? Why am I such a failure? And we can avoid that second arrow. So it's not that there's not pain, but it's not suffering. It's different than this is something is wrong, or something's wrong with me, and this shouldn't be happening.
So I'm wondering, what inspired you to write this book, Lessons from an American Stoic?
I've loved Emerson ever since I was in college, and I was once again, I was confused, asking philosophical questions, and I didn't have any spiritual background as a kid. And coming across Emerson's work really opened my eyes to the transcendental dimension of life. Mm-hmm. That there is a dimension of being that is beyond us, bigger than us, that we're a part of, but is far greater than we are. And Emerson was the first person who ever gave me that vision, and he did it in such beautiful, beautiful language. So as a writer, I just fell madly in love with his language, with his metaphors, with his imagery. Then the more I learned about Emerson, the more deeply I fell for him, because he was a very wounded. He had lost his dad at 9 years old. Nobody really expected much of him. He was kind of a screw up. And I could relate to his struggle. And then the fact that he came to this wisdom just blew me away. I lived with his essays for years and years and years, and it was the right time. And that happens in a writer's life. You have to wait for the right moment in your life to do a piece of work.
Can I just say, your passion for Emerson, as well as for spirituality, really shines through in this book. And I really enjoyed reading it. And I was actually shocked at how much Emerson had to teach us, how much wisdom he really had. Because I've heard quotes, his famous quotes here and there. I've heard the name Emerson, but I've never delved into who he really was. And so what I really enjoyed about your book was just how it was all organized in his various lessons. And one of my favorite quotes is actually in your preface. It is, "Meeting Emerson changed my life. His big ideas challenged my puny worldview and exposed me to a vision of human potential I had never known existed. His insights were radical and paradigm shifting. Human life has a spiritual purpose. To recognize our true nature, evolve from ignorance to self-knowledge. We are each endowed with a unique purpose and genius. And our mandate is to unfold our character as passionately, originally, and bravely as possible." Emerson taught that pain, loss, suffering, and conflict are teachers and guides in disguise, crucial for our awakening, and that nonconformity, inconsistency, introversion, stubbornness, quirkiness, and a little wickedness are beneficial virtues for self-realization. I hope you don't mind. I just nerd out over that passage. I loved it, how clearly you conveyed what Emerson really has to offer us.
Thank you. I love his emphasis on contradiction and the two-sided nature of things. He always said, for every virtue, there's a vice. Every, shadow has its light. Every good thing, every positive attribute taken to an extreme becomes a negative attribute. Understanding that helps us make space for our topsy-turvy, lopsided nature. Mm-hmm. I'm always saying to people, on any given day, you're brave and you're cowardly, you're generous and you're stingy, you want to be with people and you want to be alone. This is the normal way of things. And when you get that, you don't beat yourself up for not being more consistent, more sort of monolithic and one-dimensional. The fact is, we're complicated creatures, and Emerson was a real prophet of complication. He understood that we are many people in one, and when you get that, it makes for a lot more originality, a lot more flexibility, and you understand that you're not this limited story about who you are.
A couple of things I really love that you taught me about Emerson through this book was, I think that so many people today really have spiritual needs, but it's very hard to understand how to actually put it into practice without being religious. And I think a lot of people are seeking that, but not knowing how, because we have spiritual needs, like to be connected to something greater than ourselves, but we don't actually know how to do that sometimes in modern life. And so Emerson actually has very easy, simple ways to practice spirituality and connect to that deeper part of yourself. And so I thought that was really helpful, when I'm meeting with patients and just talking about life, like that's actually a really helpful way for people to get to know their spirituality. Absolutely. Through Emerson, which I really wouldn't have thought, but it makes sense.
Oh, no, it really is, because in the mid-19th century, when he was writing, America was going through a similar time to you're going. It was right before the Civil War. The country was in upheaval. People were completely turned off by the church and orthodoxy and feeling like, I want direct spiritual experience. I don't want to have to go and sift through all the dogma and all the BS of that religion offers. And that's where the transcendentalist movement came from. It basically said, put down your Bible, put down your holy books, and go into the woods and be quiet with a tree and feel how it is to just be alive and experience your connection there. He would say, go, you don't need an intermediary to connect you to God.
Yeah.
You are God. What he said, what Emerson said is know thyself and be a God. And what he was saying is not some grandiose thing. It's understanding that we have divinity within us and that we don't need to jump through all the hoops that religion holds up for us to be spiritual people. That it's a heart, it's an individual thing. It's much, much simpler than religion would have you believe. And so that's why I wanted to do this book. He's a prophet for our times.
Yes.
At a time when people want direct spirituality, they don't want a growing number of people don't want the orthodoxy of the church.
No, we don't. And I think this book is really timely because with technology, where people are becoming, or I notice, people I see are becoming more and more disconnected from nature.
Yes.
Yes. And that's what surprised me. Emerson, he talks a lot about nature and the importance of spending time with it, inside it, and that how much you can learn just the truths about life from nature.
That was that was one of his great insights, one of his great discoveries. The first essay that he had published was called Nature. It's one of his great essays. And it's really an encapsulation, a microcosm of his philosophy, which, of course, he shared with his protege, Henry David Thoreau, which is, go into the woods and go by yourself, whether you build a cabin in Walden Pond or you just go and take a walk. That's the path. And that to the degree that we're separate from nature, we begin to lose connection to our spirituality. We literally forget who we are.
And can you talk about how he talks about the one mind with all things that exist? How did he conceive of that? Yeah.
It's connected to all kinds of things in Buddhism and Eastern traditions. The Bhagavad Gita was a kind of Bible for Emerson, the great Hindu scripture. And what it's saying is that there is one consciousness and that we all partake of. There's one big light source, and we're all little batteries. And we we conduct that light or that electric source, but it's bigger than we are, and it's fundamentally one. It's this belief in the oneness of things that made him a mystic. That's why he belongs in the thousands of year tradition of great mystics. That was his fundamental insight: was that we are one. And that we speak with many voices, but we speak with many articulations of one voice.
Yeah. And this oneness is an intelligence.
It is an intelligence.
Yes.
It's an inner knowing, you could say.
An intelligence. And when I think of nature and this oneness and intelligence, this greater intelligence that we're all a part of, I feel much more peace in my life.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. As opposed to just being this isolated little one mind that's separate inside your skull, and you've got to drive everything and figure everything out. Oh, what a difference when you realize how little control you actually have.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, can you talk about what Emerson had to say about trusting yourself, trusting your intuition, and that inner voice inside you? And is that the inner voice you were referring to at the beginning of our conversation, the one you discovered with writing?
Yes, self-trust. His great philosophy is known as self-reliance, and the essence of self-reliance is self-trust. But it's not trust of the personality or the ego. It's trusting the divinity within ourselves. Mm-hmm. He says, trust thyself, every heart vibrates to that iron string. That when we trust ourselves, we can hear that inner reverberation of the one mind.
The one mind. He felt that voice came from the one mind.
It all comes from the one mind.
Yeah.
Everything comes from the one mind.
Good point.
And trust. So that is really important because people say, oh, wait a minute, I'm not always trustworthy, meaning one's personality. And that's true. We're full of all kinds of contradictory desires, things that aren't necessarily wise. But when you trust that deeper voice, that's when, you develop true confidence. He said that's where true confidence comes from, is relying on the God within us.
That's where he says true confidence comes from.
Yes, as opposed to false confidence, which is really bravado. Bravado is, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. It's based on will. True confidence isn't based on will. It's based on surrender and connection.
And a lot of people, we struggle to discern the one voice, the innermost voice, from thoughts. How did he advise on that?
Getting quiet. That's where it's all about getting quiet. Nature and meditation and yoga, whatever it is that stills your mind, so that all of those monkey mind thoughts can start to settle down. And then when that voice of truth comes through, it's a different quality. It's much simpler. You kind of can't argue with it. You might not necessarily like what it's saying, but it's obvious when it comes up. You say, what is the simple solution? Or there's another wonderful question. Ask yourself, what would love do?
Right. Yeah.
In any given moment. It's not complicated.
No.
What would love do? It may go against what your ego wants. It probably will, but Emerson would say that when we quiet down, that voice is always there to speak to us when we need it.
And he felt that there was a voice of oneness of everything.
Yeah, it's the one mind. It's the voice of God. It's Atman. It's Brahman. It's Buddha mind.
And what did he say happens when you follow this voice?
That's when you find your destiny. That's when you come to your own purpose. Emerson said the unfolding of his nature is the true end of man. So a life is all about unfolding to discover what's unique and original in us, which comes from listening to that wisdom, even when it contradicts what the world is telling you and what you're stomping, kicking, screaming, stomping, a little inner 2-year-old is telling you.
Yeah, I believe it leads you home to yourself, to your destiny, like you were saying. That's why it's so important to listen to this voice, no matter what. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes it might give you contradictory, doesn't make sense advice.
Absolutely, and it often does. So that's where the self-reliance comes from.
The self-reliance. Tell us more about that, the self-reliance.
Because the world will always tell you to go along with society. It will always tell you to, play small, cut it back, don't be too original, be a conformist, be conventional. The world, society, as Emerson said, is not your friend. Society is not your friend. It's understanding that the social messages we get are counter to self-reliance and counter to self-actualization. It takes courage to go against the grain. It takes courage to swim against the stream, against the current. But that's the courage that is required if we want to become ourselves.
That's exactly it. But how did he advise that we make contact with this courage? Because it's so hard sometimes.
Yeah, I'm putting words in his mouth, but Emerson would say that it's a case-by-case condition, that you feel it one day, you're not able to do it. Okay, the next day, the same comes up. Maybe eventually you're able to follow it. And the more you do that, the better you get at trusting.
That's exactly what it's like when you trust the voice. You get better at it.
Deep knowing, exactly. But it's not easy. And he's very big on not asking other people for permission to live our own lives. So much of what we do is an external locus of control, as they say in psychology. It's putting ourselves at the effect of what other people tell us is right. We're always looking for outside authority or approval. And Emerson is completely counter to that. He says to the degree to which we do that, we remain children, and not in the positive sense of children. We remain ungrown, and that we need to learn to listen to what is coming from within us, and let the chips fall where they do.
Can you go into that? The chips fall where they do, because that's what terrifies a lot of us about listening to our inner voice.
It's part of being an emotional and a spiritual grown-up. Is to understand that when we make choices that are true for us, they're not going to please everyone around us, and we may part ways, we may have disagreements or confrontations. What Emerson would say, though, is that we don't have to negotiate with other people for permission to live our lives. We do have to live with the fact that some people won't agree with us, may even decide not to be around us anymore. That's the cost of being authentic. Authenticity comes with a price. It doesn't, people say, oh, I want to be authentic, but they don't want to change.
Oh, maybe they
want to
don't
be
want to pay the
authentic.
price.
They don't want to pay the price. They don't want to change. They don't want to lose anything. They want everyone to love and adore them, but they want to be authentic. And those two things don't necessarily go together.
And Emerson said there was a price to being authentic, and the price is not being accepted by society sometimes, and
100%.
that's okay. And that's
It's
okay.
more than okay. It's really, I mean, if you're
It's actually the purpose of life.
It's the purpose of life. It's, in fact, it's really necessary on the path of awakening.
What do you say to parents who are very worried about their child, becoming an artist and then not making a living? Because in society says we gotta pay the bills, we gotta be realistic.
I would say that, parents in meaning well often do the opposite of what is actually helpful or skillful for their child's unfoldment. Buckminster Fuller said, everyone is born a genius, but the process of living de-geniuses us. And part of the de-genius happens, I know, it happens, part of that happens through the conditioning we're given by our parents. So I think as parents, obviously we want to impart a level of practicality. We want to, but without squelching their dreams. I always see being a parent as creating conditions for the child to unfold instead of molding the child into what we think that it should be. So really allowing the child's nature to come out and to follow as much as you're leading the child.
Unfolding is a really beautiful word for all of us as humans. To let ourselves unfold and not worry so much about controlling the exact nature of the unfolding.
We can.
Yeah.
We can.
There's just an illusion that we can.
An illusion that is pretty disastrous, that illusion. Rilke said, I want to unfold. I don't want to stay folded anywhere. For where I am folded, there I am a lie. So where we're folded, we are dishonest, self-deceptive, inauthentic, trying to pass in some way. So that's a great question. I work with students all the time is, where do you feel folded in your life? Where do you feel folded or cramped? Where are you shrinking to fit? And
that is such a good question.
Such a good question.
Such a good question.
Yeah. Because for some of us, it's in work. Some of us it's in relationships. Some of us it's spiritually. Some of us it's politically. Where are you shrinking to fit? Where are you denying the truth of who you are?
Or what about shadows? Didn't Emerson talk about shadows?
He was very strong on the shadow side of the personality, the contradictory side of the personality, the fact that we all have this hidden part to us. I mean, he didn't bring Jung's nuanced, approach to the shadow, but he certainly acknowledged the shadow side of life. And he basically said that and I'm paraphrasing, but he who is a stranger to the shadow side of life misses half of the universe. That we miss half the story when we.
But don't you know so many of us are trying to shove away our shadows?
And how's that working for people? How does that work for you?
We're just not aware of it.
No.
And it's more comfortable, isn't it?
How do you work with people who are trying to push their shadow away?
A lot of the people I work with are actually intimately aware of the shadow. And the shadow can feel very overwhelming and then cause one a lot of shame to know that they have a shadow. And so part of it is a coming home to yourself, an embrace of that shadow. Mm-hmm. That's just one of the parts of me. And that actually being a whole person is all of that, and making space and room and love for all of that. So
yes. And of course they talk about the golden shadow, part of the shadow where we hide our gifts and our originality and our power. Many people suppress their power in the shadow because they're terrified. My gosh, if I were actually that powerful, I'd have to make some new choices. I'd have to take some responsibility. It's far easier to pretend to be less powerful than we are.
Can you talk more about that? I'm actually fascinated by this topic of shadows and how it relates to gifts and power.
Well, as kids, we learn what to hide in the shadow. Uh-huh. We do it unconsciously, but depending on what gives us approval, what brings us love, what brings us positive attention and support. and to suppress what doesn't. So if you were a kid who, let's say you were a female, because I hear this from a lot of women I know and work with, and you were taught to basically hide your light under a bushel. You don't want to outshine the boys. You don't want to be too strong. You don't want to be too powerful, particularly women of a certain age. You can put what is most amazing about you in the shadow and actually feel ashamed of it. I know women who feel ashamed of how smart they are. They feel ashamed of how aggressive they
make
are.
yourself smaller.
And this is such a common thing. And of course, and men, of course, do it as well. But really getting, my gosh, how have I suppressed my power in order to fit in?
Or to make other people more comfortable.
To make other people more comfortable and to not be exiled from the group. Because, of course, our greatest fear is that we're going to be thrown out of the in-group and be exiles. And so a child will do anything not to be an exile, even when it means cutting off or denying, suppressing the most wonderful parts of themselves, the most alive, passionate parts of themselves.
So what did Emerson say to do about this?
Trust yourself. He said, rather than...
Trust your shadows or trust?
Trust what is real and alive in you. And if it's something that you've put into the shadow, then retrieve it. If you've been told that you couldn't be a writer, and for example, and you've put that inspiration into the shadow, it's your job, one's job, to retrieve it and to honor it.
What happens if the shadow sides of oneself feel most alive to them?
Well, they do. They don't feel alive until they're brought into...
Oh, that's what he would say.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Of course, it's the things that we suppress, the gifts that we suppress become our greatest crosses to bear, our greatest sources of unhappiness. Whether it's suppressing your creativity or your sexuality or your whatever it happens to be, that becomes a terrible suffering. So really the choice is, am I going to just suffer in silence and self-suppression, or am I going to risk letting this stuff out and risk being happy and risk having a more true life?
I was thinking he was talking about shadows like the way Jung might talk about shadows, like there's parts of us that are really dark or like engaged in things that we would rather not it be engaged in. And
there's that too, of course. But as you know, one doesn't heal that by denying it.
Right.
What did Jung say? When you don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The work of healing and wholeness and self-discovery is illuminating those things that we're ashamed of in ourselves, that are shameful, but they still need to be illuminated so that we can work with them and just know that they're there. The power of just knowing things are there is wildly underestimated.
I agree with you.
People say, gosh, well, what am I going to do once you don't have to do anything. Just acknowledging it has a healing effect. They say that light has a disinfectant. Light's a disinfectant.
Yeah.
So just saying, oh, I can be really greedy. That's something many people don't admit, but I can be really greedy. That has that's
okay. That's acknowledging like I accept. That's
it's empowering because self-suppression and repression takes energy. So, it takes your energy in a non-productive way and you end up being half less than who you really are, instead of allowing ourselves to be whole, including the things that we are ashamed of.
So he said to be authentic, and that means being a whole person, our shadows included, and to have the courage to do that.
Right. And that does not mean, I should reiterate, that we go around acting out our shadow knowing it's there doesn't mean that we then...
That's a good point.
No, it's a huge point. It's like knowing your desires. We want to know what our desires are. And some of them will be helpful. Some of them could be not helpful. So we're not saying just act out on your desires, but at least knowing that they're there is empowering.
So what would he think of modern times and what's going on in the world today?
He would be absolutely appalled. I mean, there are so many things about contemporary life that Emerson would be disturbed by, starting with artificial intelligence.
He would not like. What would he say on that?
Oh, he would say that we are depriving ourselves of thinking and our obsession with technology. He made a clear distinction between the external reality and internal reality. And we're so focused on the externals, including technology now. And AI is a form of external that we're that we're impoverished internally. He was Emerson always emphasized the internal life, internal values, the process of self-knowledge, much more important than focusing on making it in the world or achievement.
Maintaining connection to that inner voice, the inner divinity inside us, which AI could get in the way of if we are constantly farming out our thoughts to it, or all the things we are processing into it.
No, this is bad news. Intellectually, spiritually, AI can do wonderful things too. It can write marketing copy, which for those of us who are in business for ourselves can be very.
You think it writes good marketing copy?
I'm using as an example. There are certain kinds of rote things that it can do, be useful, but I think we need to bring a lot of discernment to it so that we're using it and it's not using us.
How do you advise writers use or incorporate this technology, or totally avoid it? What are you advising students?
I say use it for research. I think using it for research is fine. Do not use it for actual writing. I know people say, well, what's wrong with having it generate a first draft and then I can just work on the first draft? Because you're skipping a major step in the process of creation. You won't have the same satisfaction that you would have if you actually made it happen on your own, if you just take it from AI. So it really is a personal choice thing, because it's a tension between efficiency and authenticity.
Tension between efficiency and authenticity. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Because if you want to do it efficiently, type it into ChatGPT. If you want to do it authentically, then rack your brain a little, brainstorm, see what comes out of you.
Your brain a little. Yeah.
Do the work. And many people don't want to do the work. They would much rather have it done for them. And you know what happens when you farm out too much of your own exertion, you get weaker.
But what do you do if everyone else around you in society is doing that too?
What do you mean specifically?
Like everyone's using AI, then you got to keep up, and then you're not keeping up. And then society's like, why are you less productive? And young people maybe just trying to learn the technology to keep up. I wonder what Emerson would say about that.
And young people do need to understand it so that they can choose how to use it wisely. But that line of thinking is the reason that Lance Armstrong got into doping, because everyone else was doing it. He couldn't keep up unless he did it too, and it ended up bringing about his downfall. Mm-hmm. So was that a wise thing for him to do? Would he have been wiser to start losing races, but at least do it on his own steam? That's a philosophical question that for another time. But that line of thinking, everyone else is doing it, so I've got to do it too, is for Emerson, that's the essence of conformity. He was all about nonconformity. Yeah.
And as a child psychologist, one of my jobs has been to help each child find their voice, their authentic voice in the world, because this voice is guiding. And it gives you wisdom, and it helps you figure out what you want to do compared to what everyone else wants to do. It's very important that children find this voice. And I think one of the exercises is through writing, but I worry about AI becoming much more prevalent. Do you have any advice for parents as it comes to their children writing and assignments in AI?
I recommend that they don't use it. I think that
don't use it at all.
Don't use it at all. I mean, use or let the child can use it for research, perhaps. But the problem is that if you ask, for example, you have a student paper to write and you ask ChatGPT what would be a good approach to this, there's no originality. You've just kind of gotten this algorithm to spit out what the common denominators, but there's nothing original about it. And so I wouldn't, if I were a parent and I had a kid in middle school, I would keep them off AI as much as possible. I would, but I'm a Luddite. I'm one of these people. I don't think kids should have iPhones before they're 18. So that's just me.
What about college students or working adults? Do you feel like we should use AI to help us with our productivity, or do you feel like something is lost?
I know that something is lost. I think the older you get, the less it matters. In the sense that I think if you could get through the first 18, 21 years of your life pretty much on your own steam, doing your own papers, your own writing, your own reading, you would be doing yourself a major favor for your lifetime, just in terms of your brain development and learning and self-awareness.
Mm.
I think after that, if you want to use it at work for meaningless tasks or rote kinds of tasks, why not? I don't think it's doing any damage.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, though, that as you know, people are getting more savvy about when people are turning in AI generated stuff. So you can't, they recognize, there are ways of recognizing it now. So folks are going to have to start getting more creative with the way they're using AI
Now,
so they don't get flagged.
now, do you feel that things written by AI, do you think it's art?
No.
Someone created it and they thought of the idea and the AI helped generate it, but they were like in a co-creation with it?
If they're going to credit chat or AI, if they're going to credit AI, so by them and AI, okay,
Uh-huh.
if they want to. And I know that there are people, visual artists use AI for certain kinds of things, and people who are into design use it for certain kinds of things. That's not my field. I can't really comment on that.
Mm-hmm.
But as writers, it's not kosher. It's not kosher to put in language that has been generated by artificial intelligence and pass it off as our own.
What do you think is going to happen to writers in 100 years? Do you think writing will be like what it is today, where we had to labor over it? Or do you think they're going to use more and more AI and something's going to be lost in the human voice?
I think something will surely be lost in the human voice, and I don't know what's going to replace it.
Oh my
It's happening
gosh.
so
You
fast.
do think something will be lost in the human voice?
I do.
Oh,
I think it's going to become rarer and rarer to find authentic, original things. That as things are more
voice.
voice, yeah. I mean, in terms of it's just going to become rarer and rarer to find folks who are so old-fashioned that they actually rely on their own inspiration instead of co-creating with machines.
Well, the thing about with writing, it's a craft, and it takes so much brain power to write and to put down your voice. And then your voice doesn't sound as good or like neat or clean, and then you have to try again and do it over and over day after day. It's extremely intensive. And
It's
so
very intensive, and not everyone
slow,
wants to do
slower.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's very slow. It's slow, and it can be really grueling. The
Grueling is a
thing
good
for
word.
writers, though, for people who want to write, is there's also a satisfaction in it, even though it's hard. There's such satisfaction, and in the same way that an artist who has to chisel a sculpture out of a piece of rock, if you said, "Oh, you can just set up a computer or a printer kind of thing and just have it done for you," it takes the whole joy out of it. It takes the entire reason for doing it out of it. It's the risk and the struggle and the labor and the uncertainty that make it creative. Otherwise, otherwise you're just turning out things on an assembly line.
So existentially, I'm curious what your thoughts on are. What does this mean for writers? Like AI works so fast, we don't have to struggle anymore. I mean, writers will still be committed to their craft, but something will be lost, you said. So,
I think that the temptation to feed your work through AI and have it clean up your punctuation or clean up is going to be too great for people not to do it.
aha.
I just think it's going to be a thing of the past that it'll be the rare artisan who will not use AI to find
That
more
actually makes
interesting
sense.
words, help your diction, help your punctuation, your syntax. I think that probably will be inevitable.
What exactly would be lost? Like like a liveliness to our writing or like an imperfection that
And imperfection. And as somebody who's written 9 books, I know each of those books has went through 3 or 4 or 5 drafts. And even though it was hellish at the time, sometimes I wouldn't trade that for anything.
you wouldn't?
Because I wouldn't be, no, honestly, because when I look at those books, I know that it was my blood, sweat, and tears that made that book. That's the satisfaction. It's not just about churning out another, 250 pages, but that's unfortunately what's happening is writing is becoming devalued and it's becoming less real. As AI is becoming more prevalent, it's just becoming less. It's becoming less of the ideal, and I fear that we're going to lose that. It's like the handmade violin. You might be able to make a violin, as good a violin with a machine, but it wouldn't be a handmade violin by a human being. So it really does come down to the human element. Like, how important is the human element to us? And this is a big ethical, this is a
It's a big question. Yeah.
this is a worldwide question, paradigm question for all of us, is how much do we care about preserving the human element in our creative lives? And for those of us who are creators and creatives, I don't want that stuff to get in the way of me and my craft. That's for me what's fun about it, what's enjoyable about it is that I'm doing it.
So from your perspective as someone who's published 8 books, how many years of writing have you been writing?
Oh, I've been writing since I was a little boy. I published my first book in 1995, so that's 31 years ago.
Yeah,
And
so
before that, I was a journalist, so I've been writing for forever.
so given that, what is your perspective on how important the human experience is to writing?
Like I said, to me, it's everything. I've spent my life doing this. I've spent my life moving commas and periods and semicolons around and crossing out the word again and again till I come up with.
And you're saying that that's important.
Oh,
preserve.
for me, it's important because I care about writers and writing, and I believe that the act of writing has a transformative effect on the human psyche. And doing it is enlivening, it's enlarging for us. So I feel like I'm depriving myself if I farm it out to AI. Let me give you an example.
Makes sense, yeah.
Coming up with titles of books is one of the hardest things. It's hard, and it's when you're writing a book, you go over, you make lists and lists and lists. So I thought, I'm working on a new book, and I thought I'm going to type in prospective titles for this book. I'll describe what the book is about. I'll say, give me 10 prospective titles, and in 5 seconds.
You put this in ChatGPT.
I put in ChatGPT. Okay. 5 seconds later, I had 10 titles, and they were all pretty good. And
they were pretty good.
And I said, I'm never doing this again because it'll take all the fun out of it.
They were actually pretty good, according to you. That means they were actually pretty good.
Oh, they were good.
Oh,
they were good. And that's what scared me. I said, oh, this is a slippery slope.
But can you see a younger writer? Well, I could just type in a ChatGPT and it'd be as good as Mark Matousek's titles. Why not?
That's what's going to happen because they won't share my old-fashioned values.
And as a writer, you see other writers using this and you're like, oh, how am I supposed to keep up? I can't write fast enough or develop the skill of the craft fast enough with what's going on around us. And I know Emerson talked about nonconformity, but that's a real challenge when I'm trying to get published.
It is, but I truly believe that what's of value will rise to the top, and that what's going to be of greatest value, the best stuff, is going to come from the human element. It's not going to come from ChatGPT having a clever idea or having a clever title.
It's the process of writing. It's the wrestling. It's the birthing of it, the struggle, that something transcendent emerges. And ChatGPT could never come up with that.
Never. No, birthing is a good comparison, because if a woman could just snap her fingers or put her finger in a thing and a baby would pop out. They might, but what would be lost for the millions of women who say that giving birth was the most extraordinary experience of their life? As painful, as risky, as difficult, it was something they have never forgotten. See, I think when we separate difficulty from satisfaction, we're on a very slippery slope. And the problem with AI and the problem with our efficiency-obsessed culture is that we want things to be easy and fast. And we lose the satisfaction piece. So things have just less value to us.
Can you tell us what life was like when things were slower?
I've said this before, that I just turned 69 yesterday, and I belong to the last generation of people who knew what life was like before the internet and have really lived with the internet. Like never again in history will there be this crossover generation.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, it's hard to remember what life before email was like and life before computers. It's hard to imagine that I was in the magazine business when I was in my late 20s, and everything was done by hand.
That Interview magazine, right?
Yes.
With
Yeah.
the Warhol.
Yes. Everything was done by hand. When we
By
had
hand, all of it, typing and everything.
they would create a board of the page, and each piece of type on that would have to be cut. And if we had a change, then someone was there with an X-Acto knife cutting it out of the page. And you
Yeah.
can't even imagine what that's like now when everything is computerized. But it gave the magazine and working there a kind of solidarity because we all had to hang out while we were finishing up, till every page was done. We wouldn't have had that if everyone was in their own little silo with their own computer. So, look, at the time, we wished it would go faster, but in retrospect, it's when we bonded as a team was around deadlines when everyone had to stay while every little thing was getting done. So I can't remember it's hard to remember what life was like sometimes without email, but it had a quality of kind of a rawness and a human element to it that is less so now.
Huh. So is that what you're noticing in these days? Is that there's less of a humanness, or like more of like optimized and everything's like efficient, and something very human is being lost there too?
It is.
Yeah.
No, it absolutely is. It's harder and harder to get a human being on the telephone. Everything is automated now. Everything requires 3 passwords to get into your own accounts. Technology has become kind of a virus in our lives, and it serves a lot of great purposes. It does a lot of good, but there is no question to me that a human element has been lost. A kind of simplicity, a directness of connection between people.
Oh, I like thinking about like when I was a kid, there were cashiers. And they would check out items out.
Remember that?
Yeah, remember. And then now it's just machines, but something is lost in the human interaction of that inefficiency.
It's interesting, and this is different, but connected. I had a run-in with a friend recently when we were making a date. We were about to make a date, and he said, "Oh, just here's the link to my calendar. Book some time."
Yeah.
And I said,
I
"No."
know.
I said, "No, I'm not." I said, I'm not. I'm a friend, not a."
Did you respond?
I did. I said no. I said no. I said no. Let's make a date the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
So we actually texted and we made a date. But there was a moment. It's like, no, I'm not going there. Where I have to make dates with my friends through their calendar, so their calendar can give me a reminder. I remember. I want to talk to you. We made a date. I don't need a calendar to remind me.
Yeah.
I had to talk to you.
I love that example because it like really speaks to being more intentional in our interactions and being more human. Yeah, I really like that example because we have to actively be human with each other and actively be intentional about not being so efficient all the time. The humanness is lost. But sometimes humanness is like we make mistakes and we're correcting things together and it takes longer,
Yes, exactly. But
that's the magic.
You can open your book the way I'm opening my book or my Google Calendar, whatever, and we can negotiate a time, and that shows that you care enough to do that.
Yeah.
Instead of sort of call my secretary and make an appointment. It's like I just said no. I said no, and we had a moment. It's the first run-in we've ever had in 40 years of friendship, but it was good. I needed to stand my ground. I said, I'm not going to contact your Calendly or whatever they call it.
Calendly or something.
And book some time. No, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I felt like I did feel like a dinosaur when I said that, but for some reason it really mattered. And talking about it now kind of shows me really why. Because I felt like something about our human connection as friends was being compromised.
Can you talk about the beauty in being human?
Yes, all day long. What interests me is I'm interested in the imperfection, the contradictoriness, the mess, the
humanity,
the longing, the pathos. Yeah. That's what I find most beautiful about being human, is that we're these clay-footed creatures with our eyes on the stars, and that we really are both, that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, humans having a spiritual experience. We're both. And I love the duality of that. I love that it's not perfect, and that we have to keep learning, and that failure and struggle are how we keep learning and growing. I love that. I'm a kind of a transformation junkie. And for me, there's nothing more exciting than the fact that we can actually evolve and we can actually heal. I love that. If ChatGPT could do it for me in 5 minutes, I wouldn't
You
feel
wouldn't do
the
it?
same reward. No, I wouldn't. You wouldn't feel the same reward. You wouldn't feel the same reward when finally you wake up and you don't make that same mistake, that same pattern you've been doing for 50 years and you don't do it. You wouldn't have that.
The struggle is what it's about. You're giving me flashbacks to when we talk about writing, because I'd be like, this is such a struggle. This is just such a difficult struggle. And how have you written 8 of these struggles?
Yeah.
It's because you passionate about the struggle itself.
I really am. No, I really am. There's a proverb, I think it's Native American, but struggle is the highest form of song. And
That's beautiful. Struggle is the highest form of song.
It is. And I truly believe that. The same thing in relationships. Look, if you could just if you and your partner, you're having problems, if you could just step into a machine that would clear your problems.
You wouldn't do that.
Absolutely not. It's all about working it through. It's all about I misunderstood you and what did you really mean and having to get over your stuff. Otherwise, you don't get over your stuff. You don't get over your ego and your own pride if it's just too easy. I mean, love itself is effortless, but getting to the point of love takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of practice.
You know what? Thank you for that reminder. I feel like in our society, there's so many messages, like all the things we should be doing, all the ways we could be optimizing our lives, and all the things we see people doing on social media. It gets you really in this mindset of maybe outcomes or how I should be. Yeah, but it's really the struggle, like being okay with struggle. I think that's actually a message from the past. Well, it's an ancient struggle we've had as humans, but I think in modern day we're forgetting that struggle is okay.
Everything that's worth doing is hard. Everything, whether it's creativity or it's love, it's social change, it's physical healing or taking care of the body. I mean, everything that's worth doing that I can think of it is difficult.
But tell me this: what about the patience it takes to do that, and the trust it takes? I see a lot of young people. We don't have patience or trust.
Particularly when you're young and you don't have perspective. When I think about what as a teenager, 15 to 17 were the worst years of my life. I wouldn't go through it for anything. And when you're in those moments of despair and darkness, you don't have any perspective. You have nothing to compare it to. So you think it's going to last forever. Mm-hmm. But honestly, Victoria, I think that too is part of it. I think moving through it and saying, oh, I lived. I was humiliated. I was disappointed. I failed at something, but I lived. It's that's where the growth comes from. It's like saying to an athlete, you can just, plug in your finger and you're just going to suddenly be good at the 50-yard dash. No, you're going to stumble and sweat and have good runs and bad. And you get my message.
What about really difficult times that we all go through in life that are just so hard to really comprehend or understand? You write about how your sister, Marcia, she killed herself. How old was she? 21?
No, she was 29. I was 20, almost 21.
Yeah. How did you get through a time like that?
Yeah, it was hard. And like I said, I was only a kid myself. And she had asked me how she could live, she could move through this dark place she was. And I really didn't know what to tell her. And so it kind of haunted me for a long time. What would I have told her? If I knew then what I knew now. I always had a sense of the tenuousness of life, and the precarity of life and the tragic dimension of life. I really was brought up with a lot of that around me. So it hit me, but not in the same way as it might have hit someone who had a more protected childhood. For example, with me, when my sister killed herself, I also felt a kind of a relief because she had been suffering for so long. No one was doing anything for her, and she was no longer in pain. So everyone else was grieving and beating their breasts. And of course, I was sad that she had done it, but I was also aware of how much pain she was in. So For me, there was also a kind of mercy to it. And that was because I had been initiated really young into a lot of trauma and chaos. So it gave me a different perspective. But it's understanding that we can move through these times and come through, and that something in us is still intact that grows us spiritually.
That's the human journey.
And yes, and it's a mysterious journey, and it means going out on a limb a lot. There are many, many times in my life I've been just backed into a corner and I really didn't know how I was going to get through it. But each time that happens and you wake up the next day and you're still there,
What happened?
it makes you aware that there's something in you that's much, much stronger than this fearful voice that tells you you can't,
It's beautiful.
you shouldn't have to have gone through this, and
It's
why
beautiful.
me, and all.
Yeah.
It's what is, and this is what interests me about spiritual life, is what is that thing in us that isn't touched by pain and suffering and loss.
It isn't touched.
Not
It's that
touched.
inner light I believe in, that thing inside each person that no
That's it.
darkness can overcome. It's that.
That's it. And that was
Yeah.
Emerson's big thing, was that the interior life can't actually be touched by external events, except to the degree that we allow it. But the fact is, for example, the greatest tragedy of Emerson's life, he lost his 5-year-old son, Wally, his namesake, to scarlet fever. And he writes about it in the most extraordinary way. And it confuses people because he's saying he loved this boy,
Yeah.
loved him until his dying day. The last dying words were, he was talking about his little son. But what he said after the experience was that there was something in him that hadn't been touched, that as horrible as it had been, this thing that he would have thought would have ended his life didn't even touch
Wow.
this thing in him that was eternal and that was unconditioned.
That's
and
beautiful. Yeah.
and people, I've read that to people and they think, oh, he was heartless. Oh, he didn't, he couldn't have been feeling. But no, it's more subtle than that, that there is a part of us that endures in a way that we can't fathom with our minds.
It's that part of us that is eternal.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's unchanging. This is the real reason that people don't feel their age. That people feel, their body's changing, but something in us,
I
feel
agree.
like I'm the same.
Yeah.
That's that, because that's
that quality.
It is. That's the presence. That's the being, the spirit in us, the presence in us that doesn't age.
What I see people struggle with sometimes with spirituality is like, how can they mesh it with science? But what I love about Emerson and your book, it talks about this, is that nature is a way of bridging science and spirituality. Can you talk more about that?
Yes. He was very insistent about this. He said that a religion or a spirituality that doesn't take into account what we understand scientifically is bound to fail. That's why and I don't mean to offend Bible believers,
Yes.
but a Bible that was written 2,000 years ago and has no sense of the human genome, has no idea about DNA. And this can't address, it can't. So he was all about bridging science and spirituality and basically saying that at the heart of both science and spirituality is wonder and awe. Both mystics and and scientists are people who are filled with wonder over the unknown. And that's really where they meet. And that's why the greatest mystics often are scientists as well. Albert Einstein is a great example of that. Einstein says the faculty, emotion of which we're capable is the emotion of the mystical. Mm-hmm. And this is the father of relativity.
Yeah, he had a beautiful understanding of nature.
Yeah.
I think he just expressed it in the language of physics.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so much of what's being discovered in quantum theory mirrors what mystics have been, what Rumi was writing about 1,500, 1,800 years ago.
I have to tell you what I really enjoyed about this book with Emerson was not just Emerson's wisdom, but the spirit that you infused inside it of your own spirit. So I really enjoyed that, and all the different things you interwove from other teachers and all the years of study of spirituality and, I guess, self-inquiry. Can you talk more about self-inquiry and your process for helping students make transformational changes?
Absolutely. That's been my primary practice. I meditate, but really self-inquiry is my lifelong practice. It
Mm.
started, like I was saying, when I first, as a little kid, and I was asking myself questions. That was a form of self-inquiry. Sometimes I'd sit in front of a mirror and I'd look in my eyes. I'd just ask myself questions.
Really? And then you would just listen inside?
I would answer. There would be something that could answer. And that what blew my mind.
Can
That's
I
the
be
way.
honest with you? I do that too. That's my daily practice. Just
Yeah, that's
asking my inner light questions and listening.
exactly. And listening. So that's been my path from the beginning is asking questions and self-inquiry. And it led to writing to Awaken, which is this method that I developed about 20 years ago, bringing together what I'd learned as a memoir writer, as a seeker, as a teacher. And it's the foundation of it is that when you tell the truth, your story changes. And when your story changes, your life is transformed.
When you
So
tell the
really,
truth, your story changes. What do you mean by that?
well, when you tell the truth, we're all telling ourselves stories all the time. We're narrating our lives all the time. It's how we navigate through the world,
Mm-hmm.
and yet we don't often challenge our stories. So, telling the truth about things that we don't necessarily articulate shifts the narrative.
Like challenging the stories we usually tell ourselves,
Exactly.
challenging them with the truth.
Exactly. The truth, lowercase t, not like the ultimate truth.
Okay.
But because our truths, I'm talking about messy, human, changeable, contradictory truth, but bringing in the truth of the moment will shift the narrative. And when we do that, we see differently. And Emerson called it the angle of vision. The angle of vision changes when you question what you're telling yourself. You question the quality of your thoughts and you question your interpretation of things. So writing to Awaken is all about asking deep questions and reflecting on what we've written, because if we don't do that, we're missing the insight part of it.
What's an example of a deep question one could ask oneself in self-inquiry?
Where am I folded today?
Oh, yeah.
Where am I folded? What do I long for? Where do I feel wounded? What is enraging me? What's the source of my deepest desire?
How many questions would you do in a session? Or you just do you advise people to focus just on one?
Yeah. I
Okay.
it's generally just one question. I say 20 minutes a day
Okay.
as a form of emotional, spiritual hygiene is incredibly powerful.
You know what, Mark? I work with a lot of young people and people have forgotten how to journal.
No, I know. And yet it's coming back around.
So this is a great exercise. So we can get our journal, start with one self-inquiry question, journal for 20 minutes a day, and then just see what emerges. Just let
Exactly.
yourself stream of consciousness.
Exactly. Let yourself stream of consciousness, but try to hone to the question as much as possible. It's not just free writing. It's not morning pages. It's really, no, it's addressing to the best of your ability a particular question.
Okay.
And seeing where it takes you, and then rereading what you've written. And it's in the rereading that the insight shows up. So you read that, you say, gosh, is this what I think? Is this the story I'm telling myself? Our own version of things can look very kind of transparently.
Focus when you put on a paper. Yeah.
No, I get this all the time. Someone I'm working with in her 60s, and she's still blaming her mother for her life. And I gently brought up that, she seemed to, and it was a big aha moment for her. She said, "You're absolutely right."
Yeah.
But it's like Byron Katie, the spiritual teacher, says that the mind is like a child. It believes what we tell it until we question it.
Yeah.
So we have to interrupt that question, that sort of
automatic kind of thinking. Yeah.
And that's what Writing to Awaken does. It asks us to pause, to ask things, is that really true? Most of the time, it's not, or only partially so.
And like reflecting on and then is there a step after reflecting?
That's the process. That's the process. And then obviously one would hope to incorporate that into how we live.
Mm-hmm. Integrate it. Yeah.
Yeah, integrate it. So the next time it comes up, you realize, oh, I'm blaming my mother for my life. I'm 65 years old or whatever happened. Or I'm 18 and I'm blaming my parents for my life.
How long have you been doing this practice? Since you were a kid?
Since I was a kid.
You grew up in really rough circumstances.
I did. Yeah, I
Is
did.
is this practice how you made it out in one
It really,
piece?
it is. It certainly helped. I mean, I think luck has a lot to do with it, and genes, and there are all kinds of reasons why I made it out. But this was a huge help for me. This is what, and the solution came out of the problem itself. Because my problem was that I had no one to answer any of my needs and questions as a
You couldn't
kid.
go to your parents.
I couldn't go to
No, you
them, so
couldn't go to your
I needed someone to talk to, and I realized it had to be myself. And so it became no, it became a real a lifelong practice for me, and a real helper.
because that whatever emerged, the answers was actually more than yourself. It was a
It
wisdom
was.
beyond yourself, like Emerson talks about.
It was, and it's the reason because I would notice that after I wrote, I always felt better.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that anything necessarily changed, except my perspective. So that's when I realized, oh, writing gives me access to an inner knowing, a wisdom voice that can change things simply by bringing them to attention. I don't have to change anything. I don't know. I don't have
I
to
was just bringing it to awareness, like you were saying before with shadows. Yeah.
things like, oh, that's why.
Light of awareness.
Light of awareness. And when you start to make connections, that it has such a healing power. Oh, that's why I overreact to that.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's why this makes me unhappy. Or this is why I'm obsessing over this particular thing. And it just takes the charge out of it. Doesn't mean that
Writing is a spiritual practice.
for me it
Yeah.
is deeply spiritual
It's
practice.
inseparable, really.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. Because it connects us to something that is larger than ourselves. And if it doesn't, then I can't imagine wanting to do it.
So
And of course, there are many terrific writers out there, writers, journalists who just write from the intellect, and they can do very good work. But the kind of thing that interests me comes from a different place.
so that's why AI makes no sense, because that would bypass all of that spiritual growth,
The whole thing.
transformation, the whole thing, the whole journey, the whole point. Now, do you ever work with teens on this Writing to Awaken process? And do you have retreats and things like that?
I do. I have retreats. I don't work with a lot of teens. I find the folks who come to me, I have worked with some young people.
I
The
think
folks
young
who come to
people
me,
really benefit. That's why I
they
asked.
would- they
Would really, because at that age, you're really trying to figure out your voice.
Absolutely. And I've taught in colleges, and I've taught some kids who were having problems. Most of the people who come to me, though, are folks who have a little experience under their belt, and they're ready to get better. They're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that, of course, that can happen to a 15-year-old, 20-year-old as well. But most of my people tend to be adults.
Yeah. Now, can I ask you some advice that you might have for writers? How did you write 8 books? What's the secret?
Because writing has been the thing that gives my life meaning. And I'm a hard worker. I love to work. So for me, and writing is my happy place. It's what I get the most joy out of. I get a lot of joy from teaching, but writing is my first love. So I would finish one, and I would start another. And that's how I've written all these books. And also, I've been very blessed because I have a wonderful agent. I was very lucky when I was putting together my first memoir that I met a publisher who fell in love with the story and bought the book and bought my second book and introduced me to my agent. So I've been blessed that way.
There's like a luck, you said, a synchronicity type of
No
thing
question.
to life. Yeah.
No question. And listening to but only if we're paying attention.
Intelligence. Yeah.
You could be having synchronicities all the time and not notice
Oh,
them.
I really believe that too, because there's a greater intelligence happening that we're all a part of.
Yes, but a lot of people don't pay attention
But if
to
you
it.
don't believe in that intelligence, you're not going to experience that intelligence because you won't even be open to it. Yeah.
No, you might call it coincidence.
Yeah.
But if you're someone who looks for the design of things, for example, I've always been looking for how to put my work into the world. So I've recognized opportunities to do so.
Yeah.
And not everyone does that. So it's been a combination for me. It's been a combination of luck and timing, and also my determination to put my work into the world. I've just always felt that drive to do that.
Yeah. What do you recommend a writing routine? What advice do you have for putting together a writing routine?
Writing routines are subjective and they need to work for the person. But honestly, I couldn't have done the work that I've done without having a routine. I do know people, I know poets who kind of write, but haphazardly, I would call it, or now and then. But even most of the genuine poets that I know work pretty regularly. So it's understanding that, that the more you do it, the better you get at it. The more you do
Is
it, the
that a
more.
fact?
Yes, it has.
Okay. It
Yeah,
actually is? Okay.
well,
Because
yeah,
sometimes as a writer and you don't have confidence yet, you're just like, I don't know where this is going. I don't know if I'm getting any better, you know?
and it takes time, and sometimes there are long time periods of time when you feel like you're not getting any better. But generally, in life, practice helps us get better at things, and then the writing takes on a kind of momentum of its own.
Mm.
I like knowing that I'm that it's waiting for me in the morning. It helps. It gives shape to my days. There are some people who think that having no structure is freedom, and I feel the opposite. I think having structure brings freedom,
Mm-hmm.
so that when we create the container, that's when things can begin to emerge. But if you don't create a container because you don't want to be tied down, often nothing happens. So I think it requires a commitment and a discipline, but discipline, a soft discipline,
Yeah.
not hard discipline, soft discipline.
Yeah. You know what surprised me in my own journey as a writer is a lot of the emotional stuff that came up for me. A lot of stories I had told myself or that I received as a child, like writing is stupid, like it's pointless, like it's never going to lead anywhere, you're wasting your time. I
Yeah.
had to deal with a lot of that as I was working with you on writing this book.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's where the healing of the shadow comes in, because all the shadow material will come up, all the fears, and then the reasons why you
Yeah.
shouldn't even bother, and who do you think you are?
That's
And
exactly.
you would say this to me, for example, you would say this to me, and you might be having a hard time with it, and I would be inwardly saying, "Good, this is
You would?
I would, because this is what you need to. We all need to learn how to deal with our nemesis, our saboteurs.
Oh, yeah.
You have to deal with it because they're there and they're
I was
bound to come up.
surprised that was the part of writing a book, the
Yes,
process.
yes. And the closer, like with the golden fleece, with the myth of, Jason the Argonauts, the closer you get to what you want, the more the dragons come up and the
Mm.
more the darkness comes up to tell you, that it's not possible, or why bother, or this is boring and I hate it. So I would listen to you have these moments.
I'd have many. I had many.
But it was great because you kept going.
Yeah.
You did. You persevered.
Yeah. Is that your advice to young writers? Is it just to keep going and to persevere?
It really is. And being true to yourself as much as possible, as what we were saying in the beginning of this conversation, trusting yourself. And writing is it's a great challenge to self-trust, because these naysaying voices will come up. Also, publishing is hard. The
Yeah.
marketplace is hard. It's hard. So it kind of keeps you honest, and you have to really want to do this to stick with it.
And what does it mean if you produce something out of your truth and you put, you know, it's your being into it, but then, no one really reads it or you can't sell it? What does that mean as a writer?
It's not you haven't done a good enough job, or I mean, sometimes it's that the timing isn't right and there are externals that are conspiring against you. The zeitgeist isn't ready for what you want. But what I find is that it's not as much about the end result as it is the process of doing the work. And if you're coming from a true, honest place, if your intention is such that you really want to bring light into the world in some form or another, things will find their way. They'll find their readers. They'll find their, even if it's self-published, it doesn't matter. I know lots of folks who have self-published and had lots and lots of readers. And that's one of the beauties of technology. And the other side is
Yeah, that's true.
people can put their work into the world in a way that they never could have done in the past. And I love that. I love that.
So what you're saying is if we write things from a place of truth and that struggle, that just like natural human struggle, that place of beauty inside us, not don't worry, just put it out there. And
Yes.
the people who find it or attracted to it will. Like
Yes, and
just trust that.
trust that, but do everything you can to make it happen. Trust in God, but tie up your, it's so no, you do everything. And of course, now self-marketing and self-promotion, having a platform is more important than ever. You can't avoid that. That's part of doing your work is caring for it, but you can't ultimately control the outcome. You can't make people buy your book. So I always recommend that people think like an artist. An artist doesn't say, what can I sell? An artist says, what do I have in me that wants to be expressed? And the more you do that, the more satisfaction you get out of the process of doing it itself. And then coincidentally and not accidentally, it will have a better result because it came from something. It didn't come from, what can I sell? How can I fit into a niche? And that's what
that's so much what they coach these days is like study Amazon for the niches and like what.
Why bother? Honestly, if that had been the advice I got when I was a young writer, I would have just not done it, or I would have. I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah,
I came from a generation that still believed in the authenticity of voice and the authenticity of intention and the old-fashioned way of art.
And do you have any advice for young writers? I'm talking about students right now who want to pursue it as a career, but society, their parents, everyone's saying that makes no sense. How are you going to make a living?
I'm not going to lie. It's not easy to make a living as a writer. It's not easy, even with all the ways that one can monetize one's work now online. It's not easy. It's not. And if you want to make a lot of money, go become a hedge fund manager. Being a writer is a humble craft. Even if you do really well and God willing, you're on the bestseller lists and all of that, it's still a very humbling craft. It's not you can't count on a lot of recognition. You can't count on a lot of people celebrating you. But if you're doing it right, quote unquote, you don't need that. You're doing it because you love it. It gives you something that you don't get in any other way. It's the reason when you came to me, you said, every day I'm not writing, I feel like I'm dying. That's when I wanted to work with you.
Yeah. Can you explain that again?
I knew, I could sense that this was a true vocation. It was a true calling for you. It wasn't just, I want to write a book because I've always wanted to write a book.
Because my soul needs to, like a soul contract.
And that's why I worked with you for 2 years, because I knew that it was coming from a true place in you. A part of you that would write no matter what, whether it was published or not.
Yeah.
And I'm not
interested. Place we're interested in. Yeah.
I'm not interested in working with people who just want to get an agent, who just want to find that it doesn't interest me. I have folks who come to me and do a session, and they'll spend the first session talking about, marketing, and I don't want to work with them. It's coming, as Emerson would say, it's coming from external satisfaction, external, support and.
What I really appreciated about working together was just learning more about the craft of writing.
Yeah.
The craft of it. It fascinated me.
Yeah.
And it still continues to. How much really is involved in writing, guys? There's so much. Different ways of saying things, different ways of phrasing things. And it was so fun going into all the intricacies with you. It was really fun. I think I told you once, it was like going fishing together.
Right.
Just spending time fishing and like all the nuances of fishing and all that. It was fun.
But to be a writer, it is. But to be a writer, you have to be interested in your inner life.
Yes.
And the fishing, I think of Therese of Saint Therese. She used to compare writing to putting a fishing line in the water and seeing what words come up to bite.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and it's like that. And if you don't enjoy that process, then
life is all about that process, isn't it?
It's what writing is certainly all about. If you don't enjoy the craft piece of struggling with the word, and then just do something else.
The part I really struggled with was the clockmaker stuff you tell me. You tell me, Victoria, this is a craft like making clocks. But inside I would just think, but the world is moving so fast. Like, how can I keep up with my clock? And I just get really sad about it. Like everything's moving so fast. How can I contribute to the world as a writer and also be committed to the craft?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's as I said to you many times, and I say to myself all the time, is that our job as writers is not to keep up with anything out there. Our job is to bring what wants to be expressed in us out of ourselves. That's our job.
Mm.
And if you're worrying about what's going on out there, you're not worrying about what's going on in here.
So
So
true.
bring it back home. How can I make this chapter better? Why is that part of the book boring? It's bringing the attention back to what you can control,
Yeah. Like
because
Emerson
you
talks about.
really can't control any of that out. You can't
Yeah.
control how it's going to be received.
Yeah. Strikes me that Emerson had a profound impact on your life when you tell me about your life philosophies.
He
And
really,
what's funny is Emerson was a genius. Where did he get his genius? Do you think it was from that inner place?
yes, I know it was from that inner
He talks
place.
about it.
Oh, of course. And it wasn't from his family. I mean, his family
Wasn't.
were, no, no. I mean, he came from a long line of ministers. So you could argue that maybe he got some of that, his rhetorical abilities and oratory abilities from the family. But no, it came from inside himself. And he was completely discouraged at the beginning. He didn't think he'd ever do anything worthwhile. He
Really?
suffered. Oh, he suffered tremendously. I'll never amount to anything. I'm so mediocre compared to the people around me. Oh, he was very self-doubting. And the fact that he moved through that to become Ralph Waldo Emerson is what moves me. It's not like he came out, like Mozart at 5 years old, it's composing, symphonies out of his head. It was hard for him.
It was
It was
hard for Emerson.
very hard for him. Yes. Yes. And I love how naked he is about that. He's very, very humble about that.
It was hard for him because of all the things he suffered through to become him.
It was hard for him because he lacked confidence. He compared himself to his brothers. He had brothers who were very handsome and outgoing and outstanding in school, far better than he
I
was.
can relate to that. Yeah.
He compared himself to them, and he felt like he was ugly and simple-minded, and yet there was always a sense in him that he had potential. And when you read his journals, that's when you really know Emerson is from the journals. His journals from when he was a teenager was like, there's a seed of something in me, but will it ever sprout? Will it ever come to fruition? But he did have a sense of something in him. And I can relate to that because when I was a boy, against all evidence around me, I sensed that there was something that I wasn't like everyone around me, that I had something to say.
Yeah.
I was hungry for life in a way that they weren't. And that became my grail in a way. That became my North Star, was this thing in me that said, you're special. There is a special thing in you.
Yeah.
That's what got me through. And because it really wasn't encouraged in my family at all. I never was taken to an extracurricular thing by my mother. I mean, it was
Was it the same thing?
just get a job and support yourself.
Was
That's
it the
all.
same thing as that voice that emerged when you were journaling to yourself as a kid? Is it the same thing or something different? This feeling of potential.
I think connected. I think those two things were connected.
Connected.
Yeah,
how?
because it was this part. It was something in me that was bigger, stronger, knew things that I didn't yet understand how I knew. It was a kind of a sense of something coming and possibility.
It's the part of you that knows that there's a part of you that's eternal.
Yes, I wouldn't have put it in those words at all because I had no spiritual upbringing at all. But yes, that's what it was. I had a sense of this thing that knew more than I knew, that was in me, that was whispering to me that I had something some work to do in this world.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't just get a job and support yourself, that there was really something. Emerson said, listen to the voice only you can hear.
Now, I'm really passionate about existential topics, including mortality. Did Emerson talk about mortality, and how can we all cope with anxiety about dying and death?
He talked about it all. He talked about it all the time. And he was surrounded by death he lost 3 of his 4 brothers died before they were 30. His father died when he was 9. They lived literally across from a cemetery. He was just surrounded by death and mortality. He had tuberculosis as a young boy and wasn't expected to survive. So his first wife died a year and a half after they met, when she was 19 years old. She died of tuberculosis in his arms. He was absolutely
Wow.
suffused with death mortality.
Yeah.
He was steeped in death. And so mortality was a big part of his understanding of things from a young age. And he was very much a Stoic in that way, understanding that memento mori, remembering that we will die, is the most profound and powerful spiritual philosophical practice there is.
Can you tell us more about that practice?
Yes, well, memento mori was the practice that was started by the ancient Stoics, and it was to remember on a daily basis that you will die and to have reminders of that. And then that came in the Middle Ages. You see in the paintings, people they would keep a skull on the desk or some sign of mortality. And for Emerson, it was a profound piece of his philosophy, and it's something that for me has always been very, very important. Not only my sister die, that I was diagnosed with a disease when I was in my late 20s and wasn't supposed to survive. And most of my life I've lived expecting not to be here.
Yeah.
And it's driven me spiritually, it's driven me creatively. And I'm grateful to it, honestly, because we were talking about gratitude earlier, and
Yeah.
gratitude is a practice. When you almost die and don't, for many of us, you live with a different kind of awareness of life. And I think of it as kind of an unconditional gratitude. So that
An
even
unconditional gratitude.
no matter what's happening, we're still here. We still have the opportunity for another day or to see another sunrise. And it can sound very Pollyanna and saccharine, but it isn't. It isn't. It's profound. And you're not as spoiled in a way. And you don't, self-pity isn't as strong when you remember that you have this opportunity to change, to learn, to grow.
Makes every moment holy.
It does, and only
Yeah.
doesn't mean pleasant. So even honestly, even when things are bad, or there's something bad has happened, something terrible, it's not, there's no self-pity around it. Because I know, people I loved and went to college with, died 40 years ago. I've had 40 years that they never had.
Can I ask you something?
And anything.
What's this mystery of why you? Why were you able to stay alive? Have you ever asked yourself that? Why have you been able to stay alive longer?
Yeah, there's no answer to that. There's no definitive answer. It's a combination of luck and genes and intentionality,
Do you think
because
there's a greater purpose or anything to it?
I do. I don't believe in predestination or anything. But I can remember when in the worst of times in the 80s when we all thought that we were going to die, and many of us, thought that I can remember sitting with a friend of mine who was also spiritually inclined, and having this moment of they keep telling us it's over, maybe it's not. And it was such a subversive thing to say at the time, but maybe not all the information is in yet.
Oh, yeah.
I remember that moment like it was yesterday, sitting in my apartment in Greenwich Village with my friend and saying, maybe we can still have hope, even though all external indications are against us. And it was a radical thing to have hope when it was so hopeless. And and all the messages I can remember saying to a doctor, hearing about a clinical study and showing him this, and I can remember him looking at me and saying, "Oh, well, if that makes you feel better, some
Dismissing you, yeah.
horrible, condescending, dismissive remark." And that's what we were up against. We were up against everyone telling us that it was over, and I was basically told, "Go home, get your affairs in order." And so we lived with that sort of next to that guillotine for at least a decade before
A decade. Oh my gosh.
before treatments came in the 90s. So I quit my flashy job in New York. I went on a spiritual pilgrimage. I spent time in India. I met a teacher. And really, in certain ways, my real life began in the shadow of my own mortality.
It was a gift.
It was a gift.
It was a gift. Yeah.
It was. And people kind of recoil at the idea of gift. They think, oh, how saccharine. And,
No,
but
it was a gift because you were more alive.
no, there's no question about it.
Yeah.
And I look at friends of mine now who are, as I said, I just turned 69 yesterday, and I see some of my friends are kind of complaining about their waistline, or complaining they're losing their hair, or complaining about this. They're people who have had much more charmed lives than I have.
Yeah.
And there's a piece of me that just kind of chuckles. It's like, you're literally looking at the grave in 10 years, 20 years, and you're worrying about your hairline. It's like I feel like I'm in a different,
Yeah, right.
because we didn't have that luxury, to think that that not being as dateable or whatever in our 60s was a big problem to have.
I see. It just totally put a different perspective on everything. Yeah.
Completely, completely. I'm very
But how do
grateful
you
for
keep
that.
touch with that every day? Because do you find that the mind and the heart forget that gift?
Oh,
No.
I never forget how close I am to my own mortality. There's
What's your
always
practice? How do you stay remembering of that? Do
I
you
open
just naturally
my eyes and look around me. No, honestly, I have, death and dying, mortality and permanence are all around us at all times.
Hmm.
It says it's not hard to find suffering and pain and loss and grief. And so if you're philosophically minded and if this becomes a practice, you recognize every day there are beginnings and endings, that the process of dying and death is happening all the time.
Hmm.
And that can sound morbid, but it isn't. It's
No,
very
does to be. That's what I'm learning,
enlivening.
It's enlivening and there's a human component we can bring to death.
There's
It's
beauty
very
to it.
important. Yeah.
It's very important. It's very important because imagine if life was going to go on forever, we wouldn't be grateful for anything. We wouldn't have to be. There's something that someone said. I think he was a medieval monk. He said something like if the cardinal's flight from bank to bank were less brief, it would also be less glorious. It's the brevity of life that makes it so glorious. It's the fact that we're operating with the awareness of our own deaths all the time. What heroes are we to move through our lives with this kind of knowledge? How hard is
How
that?
powerful is that to really have that knowledge?
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Have you ever read a book called The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker?
No,
Oh,
should
it's an
I?
amazing book. I highly recommend it. It won the Pulitzer Prize. It's by an anthropologist named Ernest Becker. And it's basically saying it's the denial of death that kills our lives. It's the denial of death that, leads us to invest ourselves in all of these superficial things and
Yeah, it's death anxiety.
what he calls immortality projects.
Mhm.
And there's a whole field of psychology that grew out of Becker's work called terror management theory.
Oh, I thought you were going to say existential psychology with y'all.
Very close to existential psychology.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. So, what I really believe, like, we're all walking each other home, and some of us are ahead on the journey than others, young people. What
Yeah.
advice do you have for those of us who are behind the path of you in terms of like living with such vitality? That's what I that's what I've learned about you. I just really enjoyed your vitality and your passion. And
Mm.
how do you keep it alive with all the crap that goes on and all the things that bog us down every day?
Honestly, I'm grateful to be here. It's really what we were just talking about is I'm genuinely grateful to be here because I know how unlikely it is that I would have survived to almost 70 years old. So I'm in wonder
Mhm.
a lot of the time. So even when there are bad things happening, there's the feeling of wonder doesn't leave me.
That's what it is.
Emerson said the proper emotion is wonder. And that's one of my mantras. The proper emotion is wonder. So that even when there's grief, even when there's heartache and difficulty, there's a piece of me, it's the seeker piece that's saying, isn't that extraordinary?
Mm.
Isn't it extraordinary that my partner's mother has been on hospice for the last year and is still alive? And some people would look at this and say, "Oh God, what a tragedy!" And I look at it and I'm in awe of the strength of the life force in this woman. So that's what I relate to in people. I relate to their life force, and I relate to how amazing it is that we're here at all together to be having this conversation. This will never happen again in all
In all of time.
of time. In all of time, these two souls will never come together and have this deep, and interesting conversation.
Do you know what I love? I feel like you're speaking out of that eternal place, and I'm trying to. So it's like our eternal place is talking to each other and meeting each other.
It is. That's beautifully put.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Mark. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been my pleasure. Good to see you, Victoria.
If you'd like to support the show, the most helpful way would be to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or YouTube.